Navid. Welcome to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. This game came a little bit out of nowhere for me. 1979 Revolution, Black Friday. And so you want to just start at the beginning? Where did you come from? Where did you get your start in the industry?
Well, I actually first started off as, I went to film school. Actually started off in film, so I did a feature film in like 1996 with the illustrious skills of Billy D. Williams, my first indie film. And did that for a while. And then when I moved down to New York, the development team and the guys, Rockstar Games, was just getting rolling into GTA 3, and I got the opportunity to come on board and direct the cinematics on GTA 3. And that opened up the door to start working on Max Payne, because they came back to back, and then Vice, and then Max Payne 2, San Andreas, The Warriors, Midnight Club. Basically got to work on all these amazing titles that Rockstar did between 2001 and 2006 as a cinematic director and head of production. So I got all my chops in the gaming industry from Rockstar before I ventured out to 1979 Revolution.
Awesome. So I think people would love to know a lot more about what it's like inside Rockstar, like especially the New York branch. Can you maybe just explain to people that aren't familiar, like where the bulk of Rockstar's development takes place and what the New York division is up to?
I mean, from my experience, there's a fair amount of creative direction coming out of New York. I mean, obviously they do marketing and all the publishing elements, which is was outside of my knowledge and my spectrum. But everything, from the lighting, from the writing that was being done by Dan to the motion capture, to the casting, to the elements that really led to the flavor of the game, spearheaded by Sam and Dan, came out of New York. But that doesn't say that gameplay, all the things that kind of makes it resonate. But both go hand in hand, right? Like having great mechanics is part of the equation you get when you're playing a Rockstar game, but that pop culture, that story, that's also not meant to be like even keel, but kind of wacky and humorous and extreme is the other part of the special sauce that I think has made a lot of the great Rockstar titles.
So did Sam and Dan see your indie film and then they recruited you for GTA 3, or how did that work out?
It was actually a guy who was the head of development, a guy named Jamie King. And they actually just asked me to come and do a test, a motion capture test with a pretty limited volume size and a cast that were basically kind of volunteers and put together. And I think it was, that was the first step into kind of gaining the confidence of a group and a team that's pretty protective on their creative visions, to say, hey, you know what, we actually think this person could be one of the team players that can help us kind of bring our vision to fruition. So it was, I know there's a lot of extreme stories that kind of come out of what happens at Rockstar, and from this side of the wall to that side. My experience was more of a group of guys that were really just trying to push it as much as they could, and were not shy when it came to doing whatever it takes to take up the production value and push the game beyond it even being compared to games, being compared to like a mega entertainment franchise. So for somebody, it was just liberating for me. It was just like, hey, we want to do motion capture in-house. We want to shoot for the stars when it comes to casting. We want to do all our audio in-house. We want to build an extensive world, so each character, even the peds on the street, have to have their own personality. So it was, it was liberating.
Yeah. So I mean, working on GTA 3, one of top 3 milestones in the industry, I'd say. What was it like inside that game's development, and who doesn't get enough credit, or who should we credit the most for pushing through that crazy milestone?
I mean, I think that everybody that was kind of at the top there, from the art team that was there under Aaron, to obviously the leadership of Sam and Dan and Les Benzies, who was actually driving the engine as well, combined with, the animation director, Alex Horton, that was on board, and everyone from Ian who done concept art. Like, I think everybody on that team on GTA 3 that I was working in, and also should be noted that I kind of came in towards the tail end of production, really the cinematics at that particular stage, and for a game that went from top down to 3D, there was so many other elements coming in that I kind of came in mid-development to be a part of it. But I think it was a combination of vision combined with aspiration and ambition that really kind of pushed it. And I feel like that's always kind of come from the top down, and there's just a number of people at the top who we've seen also continually build successful other games like Red Dead Redemption, which is one of my favorites. So I think, it's been pretty solid across the board. And it was a smaller team, everything it was a little bit more punk rock. And we were just kind of, at times, were entrusted and just kind of knew that we had to push things. And so I think the team that they put together, they had high standards for themselves. So it just kind of had a domino effect of just making something better and better and better. And we saw that jump, I think, even from like Vice to GTA 3, you could see like the flavor that kind of came about in Vice was just even more engaging. It was more committed to a story. It was more committed to characters that were kind of a little bit crazy and a little bit more defined.
What's your read on Sam and Dan Houser? What makes them special? Do you have any memories that really stand out in your mind as like, this is the defining moment that I saw with those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think the defining moment is and who they are is very, very apparent in the games that you get at Rockstar. It's a reflection of their personality, which is they don't compromise. And it's really, really refreshing to see in an industry that is being spearheaded by so many people in the creative world, but then gets unfortunately either squashed down or limited based on budget, based on publishing priority, based on the development team's affiliation to the publisher, like all these other elements. So to have people be able to be successful at the level that Rockstar is successful comes down to the fact that there's a commitment to a vision and there's no compromise. And as a result, they make a great, great, great game and a great, great experience. And that's been consistent. And I think it comes from how Sam and Dan have approached making games and never, ever pretending to make anything other than the greatest form of entertainment.
Do you think it's healthy? I mean, because everyone's working their ass off in the industry, but I mean, they must push people so hard.
Well, I think the game industry in itself, nobody really, the production pipeline is compared way too much to other forms of media, which is ridiculous because the fact is that there's so many more layers to a game. I mean, you're building worlds, you're breathing life into characters that people are creating their aesthetics from fresh eyes. You're giving personalities. You're creating. When you shoot a film, you can shoot a car driving by. You have to actually build that car. You have to give that car physics. You have to. So I think the idea of trying to pop out games as often as Hollywood does Marvel sequels is just. It's really apples and oranges, but because we've kind of slotted all media into like this one particular sector, it's become more like it should be that. No, I mean, I think everyone talks about the overworking, the underpaid game development teams, and I think there's been some opportunities to dive into mobile and have a smaller team. I think a lot more people are being rewarded for thoughtful and like cutting edge design. So as a result, we're getting different experiences to the table. But I think it's a dilemma that kind of continually exists, and I'm not really sure what the answer is.
Yeah, but the toughest medium that you've worked in for sure.
Yeah, we've done feature films, we've done 2 feature documentaries, I've done graphic novels, and I've done games, and even prior to 1979 Revolution, I've been kind of hired as the cinematic director on other projects, but to actually go from A to Z to make an entire game, a game that really there weren't that many templates out there for us to kind of replicate. Certainly the first game of its kind in terms of doing something based on real events. It is a serious amount of work. And the concept of prototyping and testing and crashing between what game designers think should be the key mechanic, and then how do you actually make sure that you get across story, narrative, and value to choices that you make.
Yeah. So you want to just talk about Ink Stories and what
Sure.
this company is, how it was founded, what the goals were?
Sure. So Ink Stories is really a multimedia kind of studio. We've done, as I said, we've produced and distributed films, documentaries, graphic novels, and video games. We've come on board, myself, to work as a cinematic director on other projects. But at the core of it, we are content creators. And we've delved into VR now and are putting something out, actually an iteration of 1979. So I think at the core of it, Ink Stories believes that stories should dictate the medium rather than the other way around. I feel like most people are like, well, this story, this is the story that we have, and because we're a video game company or a software company, we're going to make this like into this particular kind of content. Look, quite simply, nobody needs to see another documentary on the 1979 revolution or a feature film. It's already been done by the BBC. The feature film, even though it's somewhat in the same ballpark, Argo covered a little bit of that area. So if you're going to make something that's going to cover this kind of content, why not do something that no one's done and do it as a game? Because I also am a believer that interactive experiences, gaming, which is a really kind of a lo-fi name for the actual experiences that you have today, has the potential of having a greater impact than any other medium in terms of making people understand or at least get an insight on real world experiences and real stories.
Yeah, for sure. So how long have you wanted to make a game or an interactive experience based on the Iranian Revolution?
Well, there was a game that came out after GTA 3 called State of Emergency that Rockstar put out, and it was fun. It was cartoony. It was violent as hell, but it really embraced the concept of chaos. And I think once I started thinking about how environments are actually in games can be just as much of a lead protagonist, it made me start thinking, what would happen if you actually did a revolution as a background for a game? And then that led to me starting to think about, well, what if you actually did? I went off and Ink started doing feature documentaries after I'd left Rockstar, and then said, hey, what if we brought this chaotic kind of world based on real events, but bring actual interactive experiences together and crush them into one piece? And that's kind of what we've done.
That's really interesting. The State of Emergency. It also makes me think of like kind of the chaos in the streets in like the last chapter of San Andreas. Mm-hmm. Was it also a reference point for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That was absolutely a key element of it. I think some of the cinematic work I did on Homefront, the opening scene when the bus is going through, and the mood that it was able to kind of establish, that darkness, I thought that was a very, very strong way of storytelling through a game by just being almost a witness to what's taking place in the world and then dropping you into it, and you have to kind of survive and navigate your way. So that was definitely a huge influence. And I think just the GTA idea, concept, and it's not just unique to GTA, but the ability to have your own way of navigating a sandbox world, that level of choice is really liberating for me anyways as a player.
So how'd you actually decide on the genre or the gameplay and interactions that players will have? I mean, was your original ambition to create an open world?
The original idea was to make more of an open world game. But what started happening is, as you started examining the different types of designs that are out there for games, we realized that the adventure game model was the best in terms of for narrative storytelling. And that's really what we wanted to do. We wanted to kind of show people behind the curtains of what Iran was like back then, rather than what they might come to as a conclusion from the 35 years of watching CNN, ABC, and so forth in a 2-minute clip. So the idea was that the adventure idea could really help us not only focus on narrative, but actually tell and draw from real events and use real images and actual audio recordings and embed it into the exploration part of the game.
All right, I want to talk to you about the real images and audio recordings and stuff. Where did you get that? Especially like the home movies. It's such awesome, crazy footage. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you do an independent game, you do it with all your heart. It's all your passion that's in there. And I think what really resonates with people, and they might be forgiving of it not being have the same fidelity as, like, let's say, or have the endless outreach that we see with like a Dark Souls 3, is putting yourself into it. I think people recognize personal connections. I think they see heart in games, and that drives people just as much as the fidelity kind of conversations that take place. So those home movies are actually home movies my grandfather shot from 1950 to 1979 in Iran. Yeah, and so we wanted to put that in there because it did two things. A, it allows me to have a personal connection to the content. So I'm going to make sure that content that we are creating is as incredible as it can be, because it's not just a reflection of my work, it's a reflection of my personal life. But then also on top of that, it allowed us to break down these barriers. Seeing my mom on a floaty at the Caspian Sea in a bathing suit from 1960 is pretty shocking when all you see now is images of women covered up in chadors in the news, or guys wearing, the turbans and with the long beards, compared to, the guys who pretty much look like anybody else from the 50s and 60s with their black suits and ties.
Yeah. So I guess that's the big question with this game is, where do you deviate from reality? Are all the characters based on somebody real? How do you choose and pick and choose what's real and what's not?
So basically the process was we approached making the game as you would research out, and we did over 40 plus interviews. The 40 plus interviews that we did kind of had common themes that floated to the top. Those common themes wind up becoming the narrative of the experience that we started creating for our protagonist, Reza, and how he's kind of going through it. Things like people being excited to be on the streets, the fact that people were putting aside their differences, the fact that there was a definitive class system, the fact that there were some people who just wanted to kind of tear it up and had no interest at all in the politics, to those who were very much interested in politics, almost to the point that it hindered them in trying to actually get their message across or to be able to, confront authorities. So all of these things kind of came together to create the narrative for all the different people that you kind of come across and experience. They're all based on real people.
Gotcha. So I guess the big question then with historical-based games is how you can allow for player agency, but still make it fit within the constraints of historical events. And I guess if you take that kind of non-specific approach of these people are kind of culminations of bigger movements, you're less limited by that. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, look, we could take a look back now at, let's say, the highlights of how World War II has been summed up. An extreme number of soldiers that died. Obviously Germany's attempt at world domination, the persecution of Jews and the Holocaust. And these are kind of become the main themes that people try to sum it up. Well, none of that stuff would ever actually change, but the impact that you could have by possibly showing a German family that's actually sympathetic to the problems that are existing, to the German family that try to hide Jews, or to the journey of a single person from their home all the way to actually Auschwitz and what took place. the history doesn't change. We don't change that who wins or who loses the war, but it's the story of the people. And I think that that's not, and I think there's a great opportunity within the confines of the truth and the reality of history, but actually, rather than focus on the leaders or the movements that took place politically, actually focus on the people that were on the street and that had to deal with not necessarily easy yes and no questions and solutions, but kind of stuck in the middle, stuck in the grayness of really what takes place when your world is kind of turned upside down.
Why do you think the gaming industry has shied away from nonfiction as much as it has? Why do you think that people aren't doing more games based on real events and trying to be true to it?
I think that it kind of comes from the fact that we look at movies and we look at these big blockbusters as kind of taking us away from the world that we live in and introducing us to like fantasy and so forth. And I think gaming has kind of followed that same path. But saying that, that's starting to get also old. I mean, look, we're not having that many new titles come out. If everything is an iteration of a previous title. Anything that's kind of new, we're seeing some stuff, obviously, in the mobile world. But what used to exist 5-6 years ago, which was that mid-tier of development teams that were getting, supported by publishers to make new IP, to create, have to change. I think we need to start looking towards real stories. I think there's more potential for growth in different areas of making kinds of different types of games, but we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And I think publishers have gone traditionally for the lower hanging fruit of what's been very successful in film and television and try to kind of replicate that, but obviously within the focus of a proper game design.
It's interesting. I don't know if you followed it, but a couple of years ago, another big documentary game that came out was Cat in the Coup, which is also set in Iran in the 50s. Did you pay attention to that?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a game that we know very, very, very well, love, and obviously is somewhat in the same ballpark of the journey of Mossadegh, who was the prime minister who was actually elected before the CIA coup. So yeah, it was a great kind of a game. And even, I mean, outside a game, for us, the graphic novel Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, which then also went to be made into a movie, shows that there's viability for this kind of content across all types of mediums.
Yeah. What other games did you look at or pioneers in the nonfiction genre that you studied?
Well, I mean, first of all, outside of the nonfiction, I think the huge boom that Telltale has had within the past 18 months really kind of resonated with us. We loved the games that they were making and thought, wow, this could be an interesting approach, and you could see that they have an influence certainly on the game. But in terms of nonfiction, it's really hard to kind of address that. It's like, it seemed to me that part of our biggest challenge was almost like prototyping game design, but also like just prototyping the approach, because we didn't have anybody to kind of look at it. How do people use real images as a reference, not as a reference, but as a part of the gameplay? How to use audio recordings as a part of the gameplay? We've heard tons of radio stations. We've seen tons of content made for those radio stations, and they fit the story world. They help build that world that you're existing. But then how do you take something that's already been pre-recorded with a definite agenda and make it into that? So part of it was almost prototyping this, what we're referring to as verite games.
So what are the big lessons along the way? What are the big do's and don'ts or dead ends that you went down and you realized, that's not going to work for verite games?
I think one of the lessons that we've learned is that we got so involved with trying to kind of create this story that we could have been a little less ambitious and cut down the size and the scope. I think that's a classic development kind of issue that ends up is you have like these very lofty ideals, and then you try to kind of hit them. Because of just a limited budget, a small team that we kind of have, although everyone was incredible, we took on a lot to try to deliver this. In the end, I think it's done very well. I mean, our Metacritic, knock on wood, is killer. The users are really, really happy. I think the performances and voices and all that stuff has really shone. shined. But I do think that maybe our ambition was a little too big for our first bite. But saying that, when I watch movies and I see somebody kind of going for it, even if it's not 100%, I'm willing to go back to that well, because it beats the hell out of somebody who's kind of just doing the same thing and is doing just another iteration of it. So I think that's what we've kind of achieved. And it's just been interesting. The dynamics of challenges have been, how do you take an animation team and a group of animators who are very used to basically designing worlds based on the Western Hemisphere and, let's say, the cultural kind of people that live in the Western Hemisphere, and then trying to get them to actually relearn what people from another part of the world, which other than having basically turbans and getting shot in Call of Duty, are not being really reflected. So that was a learning curve on the art front. On the design and on the coding front, I think the design was a continual kind of evolving and changing element of it. And on coding, I think it was just more of like, how do we actually take something that's this big? I mean, the game is over 2 hours, not including all the ads, over 80 plus exploration. How do you jam that in and actually make it so that it's not too clunky when people want to play it on their phones, tablets, or PCs?
So you mentioned it's a small team. It was a tough development. Where did you get some of the funding from? Like, I saw Sundance is in the credits, and I'm curious what that connection is.
So when the project started out, we did a Kickstarter campaign that we raised 305 out of 395,000. So that didn't necessarily come to fruition, but what we got out of that was such incredible press and such incredible interest that it allowed us to kind of go out and try to leverage that to raise some money. A lot of people, it should be noted, their time. And donated their services, especially a lot of Iranian people. All our concept art was done by two Iranian artists who remain, undisclosed because of their concerns for their family back home. Our research department, for example, was endless amount of volunteers. So a fair amount of people also gave them themselves, but we were also fortunate to have partners like the Sundance Institute and it's the Doris Duke. Is it the Doris Duke? The Doris Duke Foundation. Sorry? And IFP that have kind of come on and with grants and have financially supported us, but also with Sundance in particular. We actually took the project to the Sundance Institute and for 4 days kind of workshopped it with some incredible advisors, from Academy Award winners to showrunners who have recently won Emmys to writers who've worked with Robert Altman and everybody in between. And that was an incredible experience because they're totally unfamiliar with the concept of games. But at the core of what they do is they just try to tell incredibly riveting, great, sticky stories. So we kind of really benefited from them and working with them.
Awesome. You talk about like biting off too much out of the gate and whatnot. The ending seemed a little abrupt. Was that the ending from the beginning, or was it a matter of like, we gotta tighten this baby down?
We probably overall we lost. We dropped scenes as we started going further and further down, because the ending is so definitive in different directions. We decided to kind of almost leave it as a cliffhanger, with the idea of having people want more, and because it would actually initiate a greater kind of conversation, and truly is at the core of it. It is abrupt, but it's abrupt in terms of it shows you a definitive ending based on the choices that you've made leading up to it. And we felt that if we try to get murky and just try to put an end to it, especially when you're just talking about the culmination of the revolution, that's almost like we wanted to commit to extreme branches. And so that's why it seems a little bit abrupt. But what's been great is that I think the stories resonated with so many people that we're already internally talking about what we would do for a sequel.
That's interesting. So with this format and this style of game, you're interested in staying in Iran. and continuing this storyline of this revolution? Is that just practicality because 1979 Revolution is a brand at this point, or would you be interested in doing other historical events?
No, we have our interest. I mean, 1979 is the first step into a genre that Ink Stories is very much committed into kind of developing and pushing out there, which is, games based on real events and real stories. I mean, if you think that a game like This War of Mine is not too far off in trying to kind of convey the same kind of experience. And there's other games that have also tried to bring real life into it. So that's what we're committing to. 1979 is our first step into this. And it's because I happen to be in Iran and of Iranian descent and experienced the revolution firsthand. But what we've created also in this process is an engine that's going to allow us to share this, and more importantly, the process of how we built the game with other people who might want to tell historical stories that are relevant to them, or want to break down barriers, or even do things that are as recent as what's taken place in the past year to give a greater depth to the story or a greater kind of insight. So 1979 is the first one. Based on how the feedback and where we're at, there's definitely thoughts about a sequel, but we're interested in now jumping into other historical stories and other kinds of kind of narratives that are out there as well.
And so the goal is also to license out the engine. Have you had interest for that?
The goal would, I think, licensing out the engine is really not something that we're interested in. We're much more interested in sharing it with people. I think we feel from the experience that we've had, there's a defined responsibility that you have in this kind of a game that's different than other kind of games. And that is that you're telling the stories of real people. People will now look to this in terms of like as another form of finding out about that part of the world or finding out about history. So those responsibilities, we take very, very, very deeply. And so as a result, we want to make sure that we're true to that. I want to make sure that at least for the next 3, 5, half a dozen adopters of this kind of thing, that they're doing it with us. And also for us, the idea was never to try to create software that we would kind of license. The idea would be to establish this as a genre. So if people are interested, we want to facilitate that.
Right on. So since the game came out a couple of weeks ago, what have been the most striking reactions for you? What's really stood out?
I think, it's the spectrum of reactions has been pretty intense, to be honest with you. There's no in between. It's love or hate, and that's coming from here, and it's coming from within Iran. People have the game, I think, overall has really resonated with players. I think that personal connection that I was alluding to really connects with people. I think gamers are also interested in just seeing a genre that they love get pushed into different directions. Obviously, the game got banned 2.5 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago in Iran.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So as a result, go onto Steam in Iran and you try to get the game. It's literally this big page comes up and it's a blocker that you can't get access to the game.
Is that a bummer? Is that a bummer for you, or is that like almost a badge of honor?
I don't know. It seems like I can't catch a break. The games that I worked on early on in my career got banned. The games I start doing personally now are getting banned. Maybe it's just me. I mean, I feel like if I start doing like a cat game, that's going to get banned somewhere for pissing off someone. So I don't know about a badge of honor. I mean, I think my real question is like, what's a government so afraid of that a video game can actually destabilize? And obviously, if that is a concern, then the real question should be, how strong is the foundation of the government or the Iranian Computer Association to ban the game? But saying that, Iranians are extremely bright and are going to be able to find ways of getting around it. The game's going to be coming out on iOS at the beginning of June. So that's going to open up other avenues for people to be able to get access to the game. So I was surprised that the game got banned because I really feel like we've told a balanced story. I think that's been one of the more incredible feedbacks that we've gotten from everybody from all different types of backgrounds, is that they felt like it's a well balanced, edgy, kind of riveting political thriller more than anything else, but that we're not taking this side or that side and kind of like putting a slant on it. We're allowing you to kind of have that experience.
Yeah, it's interesting that Iran would ban it, but I'm sure, I don't know, I guess I'm not sure, but have you also had feedback from Americans like, oh, this game's anti-American?
Oh yeah, I mean Fox. It was on Fox, and the funny thing was that the Fox headline was kind of poorly. The title of it was there's some misinformation. So when you started seeing the responses, it was just like the hell with Iran. Let's just blow them up and all this kind of stuff. And so you've got that, but that conversation is also taking place on Steam with people in the community that are really covering both sides. I mean, that's what's exciting about it, is like you're having these kind of conversations where people are coming to the defense of the game, where people are attacking the game, and we're not actually involved in the conversation. And people are trying to provide clarity so that people understand the scope of what the game is taking place. I don't see that often on game threads, and it's deep and it's pretty intense.
Nice. And so how proud are you of this game? Is this a crowning achievement for you?
I'm extremely proud of this game. I think what we've achieved with it is unparalleled, for a small group of guys and girls to make a game that has the aesthetics of a AAA title based on a template that has never kind of existed, on a shoestring budget, and really kind of going for it. I mean, how often do you get opportunities to do that in anything in life? And for us to be able to do that, and for it to be critically, celebrated as it is also by players, it's extremely. I don't know. It's not proud isn't. I don't even know if proud is the right word. It's just more of kind of exhilarating and excited to see what we're going to be able to do as we push this, because we're only going to grow. We're only going to get better, and we're only going to be able to put more and more content out there based on our experiences and the experiences that we have now with the community that knows Inc. and 1979.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping you guys keep pushing Verte Games, but always keep in your back pocket. You can contract out with Rockstar and maybe continue work on Agent, huh?
Oh God! I mean that game is. If that game gets, I might get my next indie game done before Agent comes out.
Do you think it's going to come out?
I don't know. I have no idea. But I'd be pretty excited to see it kind of come out. That's for sure.
Did you work on it at all back in the day?
No. I pretty much finished off with the Warriors.
Okay, and that was right before the Agent time.
And actually, I left Rockstar and immediately went on a 6-week trip to Iran and kind of drove all around the country. That had a pretty big impact in terms of having conversations with Iranians who had played a lot of Grand Theft Auto and their opinions on the game, which was just such a different message than what I was getting back here, which was everyone was so obsessed with like the violence and trying to ban this and ban that. And all I was hearing from Iran was like, wow, what an incredible game where you have all these choices to do everything from like going to the gym, going to the restaurant and eating, riding my bike, listening to music in my car, and just driving around. And so it was a pretty incredible experience. So, and then after that, I came back and shot my first documentary. So it's just like all three of those pieces kind of came together for 1979.
I'm curious with the Iranian reception to GTA. I've never really thought about this. Do they understand that there's a lot of parody going on there of American culture? Is that perceived
Absolutely.
Internationally? Okay.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the senses of one of the things they kind of like about it. Like imagine being able to be in Iran and actually have that sense of humor applied to your own government, or the hypocrisy that exists in the administrative or financial infrastructure of your nation, of your country. So I think that element of it just shows on a meta level the ability to design without kind of any limitations, to create content without worrying about who's going to tell you what you can and can't do. And then on the game front, to actually be able to drive around in Miami, in LA, or in New York and be able to just choose what you want to do. It's not almost like there are missions there, but you never have to partake in them. Violence is a part of the game. You don't have to partake in it. And I think that freedom of choice is unbelievably powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts on the Leslie Benzies situation with Rockstar. Have you been following that story?
You know, I caught wind of it. I don't even know where to start, to be honest with you. I think that's pretty complex. I think it goes way back. I mean, it's got personal and professional written all over it. But yeah, no, I have no ideas in terms of how that's going to play out. You know, right now, to be totally honest with you, my focus is trying to make sure that we keep on going with what we're doing. Game development is not easy, as you know, and as probably many of your other guests can discuss, or can be very easy. But I think if you're pushing something that you truly believe in, truly kind of passionate about, it just you've got to continually kind of push the message out to people. And I think that's what we really want to do. Is we're not looking to get accolades because we're making some kind of a game that has social impact. I don't believe in that. I think that's a bunch of bullshit. We're trying to make something that's really, really entertaining and really, really engaging. And in the process, trying to take the genre of the game that we've made and expand the platform. And I think if we just get people to take a look at it, if we just get more notoriety for people taking a look at it, it'll sell itself in terms of an experience.
Yeah, right on. Well, hey.
And people are gonna say, "Oh, I didn't like this about it," or "I didn't like that about it." That's fine. You know what I mean? Like, you put it out there. I'd rather have extreme reactions or actually interaction coming in terms of comments than people actually not being interested. It's pretty easy to go around and kind of crap on elements of games that people don't like. And I think we see that all the time, and that's fine. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. That's how you're going to that's what's going to stay in a developer's head when they come to make that next iteration of the game. And we know that we haven't necessarily created the most perfect experience, but at the same time, we've created a cinematic story based on real people's experiences that has not just like making choices, but actually has the ability for you to take photos based on real events, has you navigating a riot. Do we do a slam dunk job of it? No, but does the overall package that we're creating absolutely resonate, have a personal connection, and actually, can I say you could possibly come out smarter after 2 hours than you were before it? I think so. And also at the same time, realize that the person that you might be taking a look at or you might be judging, you have no idea about what their background or their historical experiences could be. And that's one of the things we're kind of losing sight of as people, especially politically, like Donald Trump, and not just here, but even coming out of the Middle East with ISIS, or throwing down some pretty extreme statements. And we need to kind of take a step back and understand, like, that's what their objective is. But if you understand that these two individuals do not represent 300 million that are living here and the endless million that are living there, we're going to be in a much better place. Right. And I think pictures and games can do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, hats off to you and the team for making something really unique this year, guys.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you for having us. And yeah, we're pretty excited to see with the release of the iOS what's going to happen on the beginning of June. And you know, that Steam sale's coming around the corner. So we're excited to see what happens with our wish list.
Right on. Well, best of luck in the future. We'll keep an eye on you for sure.
All right. Thanks very much.
Yeah, and thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Game Informer Show. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll have a new episode waiting for you. Bye, everybody.